We're going to talk about writing instruction, and we have an hour to teach you everything you need to know about how to teach writing to your students, which is very exciting. No problem at all. We wanted to briefly mention today's rhetorical situation. So it's an interesting situation in that, so who are we? So Karen, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Karen. You know me as the coordinator of years past, goes Christmas past there. But who I am today, and this is my discipline-specific stuff, is rhetoric and composition. I teach writing. My PhD work looked at hospitality in the classroom and how do we humanize the research process. So I love information literacy. You're going to hear from me later on that too. So this is my long-term capacity is in this role. So.
And I'm Rebecca Cantor. I'm currently the director of the Writing Center, and I'm transitioning into a role as the executive director of writing programs as of July 1. Thank you. But I haven't even started, so don't ask me any questions about that. No, I'm kidding. But I wanted to, of course, be here to talk about writing programs today because it's so exciting, and talking about writing instruction as well. But we just wanted to highlight that this is a brand new writing program, as all of you know. This is the first time that FYS is happening. And then next year, we're starting a brand new writing curriculum. So we're gearing up for that. It's in the booklet that you read, but that's not actually starting until next year. So luckily, we have a whole year to talk about what that means, which is really important. So we see FYS and FWS, First Freshman Writing Seminar, overlapping a little bit in terms of writing instruction, but also having different aims, which we're going to talk about today. And then again, FWS is going to be replaced by Writing 1, which is different in a lot of ways. FWS is a themed course. Writing 1 is going to be about writing studies, and so students are going to be reading about writing and writing about writing and writing and writing and writing. So we're going to keep it very focused on the topic. It's very content specific. And in both courses, though, there's a writing to learn and rhetoric focus. So we want to be giving students tools that they can take forward into their future classes so they can understand, what is, who's my audience and what's my message and my purpose in this rhetorical situation, and how would that shift if I moved into a different rhetorical situation. So we're going to equip them with tools that they can move on to different situations. So you read about the booklet, what our writing program is going to look like, but what we would love for you to do is just turn to a partner for 1 minute and ask these questions. What stood out to you in the writing program booklet information? What surprised you? And what questions do you have at this point?
What surprised you as you opened it for the first time?
And turn to your partner.
I can't. More on ideas than form.
Oh, yeah, sure. Take one, please. Absolutely.
He put our slides up if you want to reference to them, that if they can't see anything, they have it on their iTunes.
Sure.
Mike, put it up.
I think this is fantastic. The one question I have is, do you want to do anything about mechanics? It's all about language.
You're right.
So if you might just want to throw in and mechanics. And then I've always thought that rubric should start with the full range. So you're saying if they were horrible, they'd still get 3 points?
Well, what I did was I mimicked you, and this might be for the formation paper, so it's different. You and Shauna said very few people will actually get a 0, so let's give more wiggle room to this side. So that was the feedback initially.
I guess I would just say 0 to 6.
Just go ahead with 0 to 6. Okay.
I think because then...
Do you feel like the language is... Yes, I just told her to tell everybody that.
Okay. Clear.
Should we mention that?
It's clear. I think it's different.
Do you think that students can get there first year? Because I feel like they do when you scaffold. That was my answer that Katie didn't have in the meeting.
I think what you want to try to say is we expect that the way that you scaffold, you will see a progression.
That's a good point. I'll make that point. I'll make that point. Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
Will writing 1 be taught in the English department, or
Yes.
will that be discipline?
Writing 1 will be in the English department. Everything else will be discipline specific.
The nice thing is you guys already have a discipline-specific writing course, writing for comm. Writing for comm. Because that's writing in your discipline. Yeah, we already did it.
Question is writing for writing 3.
Good, thank you. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty specific on that. But I can consult with you guys when you get to that decision.
So it's very exciting. Yeah, good. Yeah.
I'm just like a
Okay, for the sake of time, we're going to bring you all back together. We're hoping to have some time for Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, please hold on to those. And we'll keep barreling along. Katie stole some of our time, so we got to keep going. Okay, you understand? I know, Katie.
It was worth it.
All right. Okay, so our goals for today. Go ahead, Karen. Yeah.
So this is going to be pretty quick, but I'm working for CTLA today, so I had to have some learning outcomes for you all. So we're going to identify myths about teaching. I don't have this one in front of me. Ooh, that's okay. Look at really what we want to do as far as content out to you that's new information is this idea of being rhetoric focused. Typically, that's not something that travels too far beyond English departments, so I want to share that with the program being that way. Highlights for the essentials of FYS. We don't have to teach you all the rhetoric and comp field in the next half an hour. We just need to teach you some tricks of the trade for FYS writing instruction. So we've really narrowed it, so that's our goal. And then I think our key thing for doing that is scaffolding. And so that's our key concept we're going to focus on today. We're going to speed through the other stuff. But from some questions that are very valid yesterday, I heard some gasp when you heard like draft 1, draft 2, like, ooh, that's a lot of grading. And it's an instinct that we professors need to have to be self-protective, or because we never graduate. You know, we can't live at that pace all the time. But so what I did yesterday was developed a handout for managing the grading load, just in response to the pressure I think I felt around the room. But it's a draft, and I'm going to continue to work on that this summer and update it. It's really more off the top of my head, not the lit in the field. But we're going to spend some time on that. And you have that handout, I think, already.
Yep.
And then lastly, our activity, because you all are brilliant, is to go ahead and apply the stuff that we're talking today to your writing prompt, turning a bland prompt into a rhetorical writing prompt that you could start to use in your course and start to brainstorm about how you might scaffold your research paper. It's really up to you. You could start it the first week if you want to, because you want them to have plenty of time to gather and explore. Or maybe you start a few weeks in after you've, so it's up to you to pace it, but we are asking you to scaffold it. That is part of a common requirement across, but you even have some options on how you scaffold it. Okay, so first of all, just kind of from the Rhet and Comp field, and partly because after 10 years of being on faculty, I know these are the myths that sometimes weigh us down. So I tossed them up here. The preview, or the preview slides, presentation slides, are in your iTunes U if you have a hard time seeing any of this or want to look at this later, because this is not on a handy handout. But these are some of the things I think we need to be free of. There's some grand narratives in all fields and disciplines, and writing tends to evoke some special terror in students and in professors sometimes. So I wanted to hand you a couple of the myths. Writing is basic. There are these universal traits of good writing: focus, clarity. We say that to students. I hear it often when I'm training professors on teaching writing. And it's simple to grasp, right? It's easy for us. We love school. We never left. But really, more so, the features of good writing really vary from a situation to a situation. What you put in a blog compared to what you're putting in an academic paper, that's different, but it could still be good writing. So that's a myth I think we need to set aside and instead pick up the rhetorical way of talking about writing, that it's situation. Today is a situation that would be different if I presented the same content somewhere else. So the subject, the purpose, the expectations, that's where we teach students to feel comfortable, to be adaptable in rhetorical situations. Not that writing is easy, there's basic traits. Just be clear and concise and I'll give you an A. It doesn't really happen. It's adapt to that rhetorical situation. So writing is a process. We learned that, most of us, going through school. Did your teachers ever have you do note cards? You had to do 10 note cards before you could move on to your next step. That's kind of good for developmental learners in late elementary school when they're learning to document for the first time. Forcing a process on writers, especially at the college level, when they're able to grapple with a lot of tensions and handle things a lot, is not a process. The field of rhetoric and composition has moved to post-process. We invite lots of different processes for students, however they approach it. The idea is that we give them what they need. They need skills. They need to try some new habits. They need to not write their paper sitting on their bed and fall asleep. We talk to them about those things, but they need to give themselves what they need. So student authors can address their individual obstacles while writing. I liked what Lori said yesterday. It's not about time that you put in a paper. It's about how you spend your energy. That is this. Okay? And so everybody's process looks really different. Everybody's experience, I would say, on a writing task, not a writing process, is very different. And then really what I want everybody to learn, if we had a universal trait for writing, it's called adaptability. That for every writing situation, you have to be able to adapt and respond to your audience, respond to your professor. Part of the school game is being able to respond to the professor-reader. And what do they need to be able to do to thrive in school? Adapt to the various readers that as they go through it. So we want to make them feel confident about that stuff. One last master narrative, I know this is a favorite of Rebecca's to try to resist, is writing is a talent. You're born with it or you're not. Either you can draw or you can't learn to draw. You know, these things, like it's a fine art, writing, that it's a talent. And what we want to make sure we say is that it can be developed and learned. We want to tell our students that. A lot of them come in very wounded saying, I'm not a good writer. I say, what do you mean? I'm not good at grammar. Writing is ideas. Grammar is going to be 10 points on your research paper. Like, I want to hear your ideas. I want to hear how curious you are. I want to see you get some good information out there. So I love this quote. There's ample empirical evidence. This is the song of our field in rhetoric and comp, that anyone can get better at writing. What teachers do makes a difference. Okay? Otherwise, we're just taking a paycheck home and pretending that we're making a difference kind of idea. Like, people will come in with very literate backgrounds, families that really supported their reading and writing habits. You'll get a spectrum. But students can get better in the course of the semester. You're not going to make them a great writer at the end of FYS. They're going to be much better after each course and after each experience they have. But they are capable of achieving. So we're going to cover, this is you. Go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, sorry. I just want to say, my experience teaching writing, the students are coming saying, I'm a good writer, more resistant to writing.
Yeah.
Students say I'm a bad writer.
Yes.
The bad writers like the idea that they can grow and change. The good writers dislike the challenge to their status as a good writer.
And that's a place for support for them.
They need extra gentleness.
You're right.
And often they're good writers because they're good at judging what the professor wants and giving the professor what that is.
Mimicking professor expectations.
And then when we challenge them to think about, yeah. So that can be one of the really fun things you get to do in FYS is challenge those students.
I always get A's.
I always get A's, definitely. Go ahead, Stephanie.
It seems like just talking about the myths like parents did, the students would be a good way to counter what
Yeah, absolutely.
because then all of a sudden we're all on the same page.
Yeah. I kind of see FYS as this image of, it's like the train depot after these students have been red penned to death in their high school scenarios, and they come in thinking, oh, I'm not a good writer because I get my papers back and they're covered in red ink. And we can have this opportunity to give them authority and say, you know, I really care about your ideas, I want to hear what you have to say, and to respond to them as writers rather than saying, oh, this is, you know, you're missing your comma here. You know, that sort of thing can we really build them up so we can prepare them for the rest of their college experience during FYS. It's really exciting. So we're going to talk about 5 essentials, we're calling them, to first-year seminar writing. Writing to learn, writing in community, rhetorical situations, transferability. So again, it's that idea of giving them tools that they can transfer into their future college experience and professional life, and scaffolding of assignments. So we're going to go through all 5 of those things, and it's going to be a little bit rapid fire, but I think it's going to be okay. We're doing okay?
We're on time,
Okay, good. So writing to learn. So one of the ways that we're kind of seeing a distinction between FYS and Writing 1 is that FYS is more of the writing to learn emphasis, right? So we're emphasizing, you know, I'm interested in you writing so that you can think through some of your ideas and come up with new ideas. Writing is a two-way street that you're going to be both expressing your ideas and also coming up with new ones and adjusting your thesis as you move forward. And Writing 1 is where we start to talk about learning to write. So we don't expect you to know, what a prepositional phrase is and to be able to, tell students where the comma goes in every situation. That's not your job at all, thank goodness, right? Instead, we want you to engage with students' ideas, and we'll be talking about that quite a bit. Karen, it's your turn.
Okay, so
It's very early.
chugging along. All right. So we will slow down here. We're on time, and this is some of the key learning. So the writing committee at APU, in order to focus with the many options of branding, I guess, to use a hip term, that they could use for the new writing program, went with writing to learn and learning to write. And I think that's a great myth buster kind of stance. Like, remember, it's not about the product. It's not about finding mistakes. It's about writing to learn. If we had more time, we wanted to start with this reflection of why do you assign writing in your courses? I've had students say, why do I have to write so much in college? And we say that's what you do, that's what you have to do to get through. We talk about this effort that has to go into it sometimes. But hopefully our first answer is it's to learn. Like, at every task of the process, there's learning that happens. Some of it's tenacity and stick-to-itiveness and going back for revision. There's all kinds of things, but it's writing to learn. Why do we not quote grab and just put a quote from a source in our paper? You read the whole document and you hear the conversation that's happening in academics. So skipping over reading your sources would really rob your learning. So that's kind of the things I coach my students in when we talk about writing to learn. So this is the answer for APU at this point of why we write so much in our courses. And you're going to get that question. And if they don't say it out loud, they're going to be feeling it. Like, oh no, I'm basically a student writer, could be their identity for the next 4 years. It's so much of what they do, or student communicator for sure. So it's a tool for thinking. We did put these full position statements for those of you who are input and learners and you need more. This is the quick version. But the NCTE has a position statement on it. And so these are just some things that are true of writing. When you do writing, it makes you think of things that you didn't have in mind before. You get to hear from yourself as you try to brainstorm and draw out your best ideas. All of these things, it generates ideas. We solve problems. Identify issues, we reconsider something, okay? Please don't ask your students Because my students will come up to me and ask me, can I change my thesis? After reading everything, I think something different. I'm like, yes, because that's called learning. You read your sources and heard from them and made connections and shifted your position. So we want to have them write their thesis first because it's going to be organized and it's going to get to product. But really, that's not learning, that's not exploring. And then their thesis may stay the same because you kind of have a hunch, right, when you go into this stuff as a writer. But we want to try out half-baked ideas, okay, and give room. This is a tough one. It's one of my favorite in my dissertation research. Somebody said, gosh, a syllabus just doesn't give you enough time for the twists and turns of a writing project, for the lulls and the dark moments and the times that you need therapy because this writing task is so hard. And she's like, because week 13 comes and you have to be done, you know, or whatever it is. And so how much can we do the impossible and try to create space for those lulls and those turns? And just, hey, think about it. Maybe toss aside that idea because it didn't work, but what did you learn from that? Let's start a new topic. Where can you try to give that to students for the sake of learning, okay? The writing process is not one of simply fixing up mistakes, but of finding more and more wrinkles. I like that image. And implications for what you're talking about, okay? It took me a long time to finish my dissertation, but I was really glad I did because the ideas I had in year one, I was not mature enough as a thinker or person to have thought those my first year. You know, but students aren't taking 4 years, but you get what I'm saying. Sometimes later in the process is when our best ideas emerge. So letting them think with it and learn. And so for us, if this sounds new to you or something like, oh, I feel a little convicted, I do every time I study this stuff, it's really a subtle shift in energy. It's a subtle shift in how we talk about students. So they say, what should I write about? I'm like, well, what do you want to learn? Like, these are the ways I talk to them about things, about papers. Well, did I say that right? Well, what are you trying to say? Because I'm not the author, you know, and they're like, do you like that? I'm like, well, as a reader, I'm a little confused here, but you tell me what you were trying to get at. And always turning it back to them to empower them as authors and to focus on their learning, okay? So here's another point.
So writing in community is our second point, and what we're talking about is we want to create a culture of writing at APU, no problem, right? So we're trying to have writing be something that everybody's excited about and everybody's engaged in, and you guys are our first community who's kind of receiving this message. So we hope that faculty across the curriculum will be presenting themselves as writers to their students, because all of you are writers. You know, you're writing in the physics field, you're writing in your field, whatever that is. And if you can express to your students that, you know, this is difficult for me and these are the challenges that I encounter, and kind of create a sense of community where it's okay for you to struggle through a writing process, whatever that process looks like for you, that's going to be a really positive thing. And also creating a community where students feel really comfortable talking to themselves, talking amongst themselves about things that are challenging, being okay to fail on a draft, it's okay to start over, all of these things. That we don't want to, you know, receive their draft and red pen it and say, you're doing this wrong. Say, that was a great attempt, and here's some things that you can do to move forward. So creating a culture where that's okay. Can you move to the next slide? Keep going.
It's not working.
Oh, gosh. Absolutely,
I
Starla.
don't use red pen, and I keep writing a tattoo, and I had multiple students thank me for
Yeah.
this.
That's the first step. Don't use red. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to use.
Switching to a green or a blue, make a difference in whether or not students.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I like to use pencil and tell them if you don't like my comment, erase it.
Yeah.
It's your paper, your name's on it.
Those and pass it on. So speaking of writing community, the Writing Center is a big part of that. I'm pretty darn proud of it. In the Writing Center, our motto is any student, any project, any stage. We did 7,000 appointments this year with students from across the curriculum, so science all the way through English, the whole range. Nursing is our #1 group of students. But when they come in, we actually sit down and have a conversation with the students. We don't write on students' papers at all, which is one of the things that really shocks people. We sit down and talk to them. We say, okay, what are you working on, and what's your goal for this, and what have you done so far to achieve that goal? What's your thesis? And if they don't know what their thesis is, we'll probably spend the whole half an hour there, right, talking to them about what's your goal for this paper. But we have students write on their own papers because our goal is to teach them to fish, not to give them fish, right? And it's the same in FYS, that we want to be interacting with students and encouraging them to have the skills. Brian, you look so proud. You're looking so great. You're just like looking like, oh, this is so great. Can you click through to the...
I'm so sorry, I was
No, you're
distracted
fine.
by Brian's
I know.
nonverbals.
So we do one-on-one appointments, and I hope that you will tell your students about the Writing Center as a great resource, where students can come in for half an hour or an hour to engage one-on-one with a writing coach. Again, we call them writing coaches because it's not a consultation where there's an authoritarian person who tells them what to do. It's an engagement. Writer Studios are a series of 6 appointments with the same writing coach. They're really great for our multilingual students, students who are struggling with getting started in their writing process, any student who deals with procrastination, right? There's some of those. We also have workshops. We do about 40 workshops a semester. And resources, and I brought some samples of those. Because these can be really helpful to you when you are offering feedback to a student. So let's say you get a paper and it's just really disorganized. You can say, see that reverse outlining handout from the Writing Center, or you can even staple it to the front of their draft. We have 40 of these, and we're adding about 10 more this summer. So I'm going to pass these around. Feel free to take one, and they're multicolored, which is always fun. And they're also on our website, exactly. So you can just send them a PDF, or you can give them the actual hard copy. And they're available in East Campus and West Campus locations, so both of those places. Rhetorical situation was in the booklet that you all read, but again, we just want to highlight what we mean by this. So Karen and I came up with this image for a movie theater and how that kind of relates to any situation that you could be communicating something. So there's always some sort of text or some sort of something that's being communicated, and that text has a genre, a message, a purpose, and a tone, right? So when we're talking about movies, it could be a horror film that is funny and has a message that, I don't even know what the message of a horror film could be, but
you are now less intelligent for having watched this.
Don't go to the basement, okay?
Yeah.
It's very brief. But then just highlighting for students that they're writing for a particular audience, and then you are not necessarily their prime audience, right? If you can highlight for them that they're writing for their peers in this assignment, or they're writing for other people who have read about this subject, and that you're just a secondary audience. It's kind of not who they're actually directing. Of course, there's always a historical and cultural context as well. Okay. What's up?
Okay.
Go ahead. Did you have a question, Erin?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Just a quick question about that.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes I find my students will write almost like they're writing a blog, like for other friends. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know any of the references that you're making or what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Can you like kind of walk me through it? Can you just speak to that really quickly in terms of how?
Sure. No, it's a really great question. So you want to be really clear about who their audience should be for this assignment. So if their audience is their peers and it's a rhetorical situation like a blog, maybe that's okay, and maybe you need to engage with them and say, okay, well, what's this reference? I don't understand. But engage with them like people. But if their audience, if this is an academic text, then that's just obviously not appropriate to that rhetorical situation, right? It's kind of like, it's the same thing that I tell my kids about swearing. Like, I don't think there's any such thing as a bad word, personally. Some of these words are really great, but it's just not appropriate to this rhetorical situation, right? I'm sorry, you're too young. You don't get to use that word yet. So that's how I feel about it.
Does it work though?
Well, they're pretty young, so we're trying, but we'll see.
Like the professor then could be a part of the primary audience, but more like as part of the academic.
Yes.
Like if it's an academic audience,
Yeah.
then I'm part of that audience.
And it's okay to
Exactly.
shoot straight and say, I'm the critic in the audience that probably everybody else understood you, but you lost me, and
Yeah.
it's not worth it to lose one person.
Yeah. I wouldn't
Especially,
use- yeah.
side note, the person who's putting the points on your assignment.
Like it. But they're just not
Yeah.
trying to necessarily write to
Yeah.
our activity.
Exactly.
Because I think the problem is we say writing, and what we mean is academic writing. But students are writing all the time. They're composers constantly. And so I like to demystify writing and say, this is a different context. This is a different genre of what we're doing. Please adapt. Because you can literally have the same storyline and put it in a thriller or put it in a romantic comedy and have the same plot movements.
Yes.
But they need to adjust to their setting. And so that's the adaptability that we want to teach. That is rhetorical thinking. That's rhetorical writing. So, yeah. But it's okay to say, not appropriate for this time. But
Yep.
good writing.
Not appropriate. Not
So-
academic. Yeah.
so-
Save it for
Yeah.
your novel.
And so another resource we wanted to give you was the Council of Writing Programs, WPA. Rebecca and I were there last summer. We're going again this year to Idaho. But I gave you the reduced statement right here in the boxed one on first year composition. More so maybe for a writing one meets FYS. But this is where we get our credentials for saying rhetoric and where we get our credentials for saying writing is learning. Okay, this is not something we made up because we like it. But this is the kind of the governing body in our, and we like it, but the governing body in our field. So we wanted to give you this, again, because of time, we're not going to spend a lot of time reading it. It's in your iTunes U. But really, it gives you more language if this rhetorical thinking and being is newer to you. There's some words for you there. It's part of why I wanted to give you that. And it brings in some of our course outcomes of critical thinking and composing. So I literally show these to my students in a writing course where the subject is writing, and we interact with them because I say this is the end of the conversation in some ways for those who are PhDs in this field. You're just entering this conversation. So the idea of an academic standard and who we're responding to and who sets these norms. So there's a lot of knowledge here on this handout. The other quick concept we want to cover is transferability, and Rebecca has done a good job of just turning this into a document in parts of your booklet here.
Yes, that's the idea of the writing courses that build on each other. They're going to take writing 1, 2, and 3, and hopefully there will be through lines throughout those courses. But the lexicon is another attempt at that, the idea that we're going to be using these terms, so hopefully you can introduce those to your students. And then, for instance, if you're saying, use a signal phrase in front of that quote, and then they go to in the next course and the next professor uses the same term, they're going to know what that means and not have to start over with this other professor's way of doing things. We see it all the time in the Writing Center when the students say, well, it's kind of, Dr. Jones's APA version of documentation. And it's like, well, that's frustrating. That must be really hard for you to kind of figure out how this professor wants you to document your sources. So if we can all just use, APA or MLA or Chicago, then we'd all be on the same page in those ways.
Yeah, and part of it is we are really giving, when we talk about support for students, is trying to get a common language, especially for students who they're first gen coming in. And there's a lot, does an 18-year-old know what the word adjunct means? Do they know the word provost? Like, these are things that are part of our everyday, but we're introducing them to a new discourse community. So part of what we're trying to do to reduce obstacles for them is hand you a common language. So I usually throw in, you've got to, I think I say signal phrase now after working with Rebecca, but I used to use a different term where I say you got to do a setup to your quote and bring it in a transition. I'm just going to use signal phrase because Rebecca put it in the lexicon, because then students will say, oh, that's not just Karen's rule. When I show up to, I'd say Dr. Dykes, but Professor Dykes' class, Wendy's class, she's also a nice woman, and I want to do what she wants, but wait, it's the same thing, Yeah. So we're trying to create some discourse community language. So if you can try to use those terms, and honestly, you probably do a lot of them by instinct. They're just internalized for you. They're like muscle memory when you're writing up academic work. And so part of what we're doing is naming it and making it explicit for students because this is new for them. So this is kind of like a language in some ways without overstating it. So if you can try to look at the lexicon and use some of those, it'll probably even give you words for, oh, that's what that is, that you just kind of do by instinct.
Sure.
So, yes, please.
What kind of writing, are they allowed to use any style in their papers for our first year seminar?
It was something we discussed in GEC when we were putting this proposal in, and I think we were fine with the idea that adaptability is the lesson. And so if you are communication studies in your APA, you can ask them to use that style guide, and they get plenty of support from Writing Center handouts and coaching and from you. And so being able to read, it's like I say, you can cook if you can read a recipe, kind of. If you can read a style guide, you can use it. Okay, so it's part of that teaching them to dig in and be tenacious and really find what APA says to do compared to MLA. But I would encourage you towards APA or MLA because they're most common. I know some of my historians maybe, is there another preference around the room? Turabian. Chicago, Turabian. I remember having to use Turabian in my APU course as an alum. But I would say use what you're comfortable with. I tell students they can use either one, and I just tell me which one they're using. Or I can look at it because it has a cover sheet. I know it's APA. I adapt to them in senior SEM because I get it from a lot of different disciplines. So try to be student-centered, but if you want to just work with one, I'd say your choice.
And in terms of the research paper, does it have to be academic, or can they use a more?
Research paper needs to be academic. We're going to talk about that in a minute, too. Yeah. Okay, so scaffolding. Yes, ma'am.
Since you're speaking about attribution and how to do that, the Council of Writing Programs outcome statement, the first year composition, what is the attribution that needs to be used for that?
Do you want the web address for that? I think it's on the iTunes U. I'm not sure. Rebecca posted some of the stuff for me because I was out of town for the last week and a half that I gave her before I left.
Is it the WPA statement or the NCTE statement?
The links are both on iTunes, so you can find them there.
They're also in the back of the booklet.
Yeah, back of it.
I think so.
Yeah, thanks for checking that. I know it's painfully ironic if we don't document.
It would seem to me that what would be most helpful for the students is for us to introduce them to the style that they're going to use in their discipline.
That's a challenge, though, because you have a lot of different students.
You're writing 5 different styles.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't even know what to tell them on a lot of the ones, and in fact, I'm not even sure what mine is anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we get a list of that? I realize it's going to be harder to grade when you go through 4 or 5 of them, but
So you mean a list of what different?
disciplines would be expected?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we can do that. That's fine. And you may even want to put it on them. You know, if you know what kind of field you want to go into, you need to do some research and find out what kind of documentation style they use. But yeah, we can definitely create a list as well.
And I mean, when I explain to them the relevance, because they're like, why can't I just do MLA, Dr. Lang? I'm like, because you're in the social sciences, you have to have the most recently published stuff. In literature, you can use some older stuff. Or sometimes if you're doing a historical look at things, you know, things like this, because we lead with dates in APA, and that's what I want to see when I'm reading the document. So when you give them the relevance behind why they're using what they're using, it goes a long way in getting some investment of effort, too. So, okay, scaffolding. Now, this is part of what we think is also maybe new knowledge. Some of you, how many of you are familiar with this term as an ed term coming in? Okay, it's not too tricky. It's the idea that you're kind of taking it into steps and you're giving support and you gradually would take those scaffolding away. We're going to leave a lot of scaffolding up even at the end of FYS. You've got to think first year experience. But so we are doing kind of a lot of giving them a lot of guidance. We would never give a prompt and then say, see you when you get your paper done, okay? We're breaking up the steps and giving them some support and scaffolding along the way. There's a short read on scaffolding from some experts out of Wisconsin who are gurus on this. I've been emailing with her lately. I put that up on the iTunes U if you're interested in more, but I think the definition gives you a lot of instruction too.
And this is just an image of something that I've given to my students in the past. It's just to let them know, like, okay, here are our 5 major assignments. We're going to be pre-writing. We're going to be doing, you know, a version 1, version 2, and maybe a version 3 where they're going to turn at the end of the semester. I'm very visual, so I just try to show them visually how we're going to be working on these different documents throughout the semester. There's going to be some overlap, what we're going to be doing in week 7 of the semester, that sort of thing. It works for me, but you can think about your own visual ways of presenting things. But then what I want to highlight is, again, we scaffold, right? So we're scaffolding a writing process for students, but the writing process is, of course, recursive, and they're going to be going backwards and forwards. And I try to really highlight that for them that, yes, I want everybody to give me a first draft on this day, but I also understand that the writing process is messy, and that you may give me a first draft and then have to go back and do some research. You may get all the way to editing and feel like, oh, well, I'm not really sure about my organization. I need to move things around. It's going to be messy, and that's okay. The writing processes are very messy. So it feels like I'm kind of talking about both sides of my mouth because I'm talking about scaffolding your assignment and making it, okay, give them these steps, but also let them know that it's not always this clean cut and things are going to be messy for them.
You have a handout on scaffolding. And again, this is for your resource. I think it matters more when you're at home in your comfy clothes, writing up a syllabus and things like that and trying to do the details. So it may be more useful to you later. But really, the big picture values in scaffolding is that you emphasize some process, the idea that you break it up. When I can get students to value revision, I feel like I have made the rhetorical angels sing because they just haven't experienced it a whole lot. I hadn't experienced a whole lot until I became more of a scholarly writer. You know, as being a journalist in the background, we wrote on deadline all the time. But another key part of scaffolding is making time for metacognition. They mentioned it yesterday, thinking about your thinking. I put an article up on iTunes U that is really student friendly. Like at the end of the semester, I'll have students say, reference that article, even though we read it week 1. And it's how to do reflective thinking. And it has examples of, like, even when you're choosing a paint color for your room, you're doing reflective thinking. You're thinking about your thinking. And so it names metacognition for them. If you could give it to students, you could use it yourself, just examples out of it. I put it in there. There's a lot of this, if you're liking this, on writingspaces.org. They're free. Students can use them. The copyright is yours to disperse them, so that's where I get them. But there is an article about reflective thinking in there and writing process. So practically how I do this is I have students write me a letter afterwards. Here's what I was trying to do with this paper. Because so many times I'll write a bunch of feedback, and then they'll be like, oh, but I was trying to do this. And I go, oh. But I didn't read between the lines. So if they can write you a letter about their intentions, what they were trying to do, you won't miss each other. It will put you more on the same page as a reader. And then you can say, oh, maybe if you shifted this or whatever you want to do. So I do letters to the reader, okay, or cover letters. What I do, too, is that after draft 1 at the end, I give them back that letter, and I say, did you actually meet your intentions? If it shifted, are you okay with that? Because I want them to obtain control over that document, that they're the author? Did they meet their intended purpose?
Yeah.
So
Similarly, I will have my students write a short author's note, and they just staple it to the front of every draft, and it says, you know, this was my intention for this. I hope that my audience gets this out of this. I'm writing it to these people, whatever it is. But it's just a very short paragraph. But then I actually respond to them. Oh, I saw that you were trying to do this, and I think you did this very successfully when I'm giving feedback.
So anything to like make them think about their choices. And then you really want to focus your feedback on their analysis and synthesis. This is the cool part of being a coach instead of a grader. Because when you scaffold, you get to do early course correction. You get to say, hey, I think you kind of missed some key things in the prompt. But if we just wait till a final draft where they put a ton of effort in, then we say, oh, you totally missed it. That's crushing. So a lot of the scaffolding, the reason why we do that is for early course correction, and then the other reason why we do that is it's personal connection. If I bring 3 students in for a writing conference, and I've read their papers beforehand, or even if I read the first few pages while they're there, and I say, hey, here's the patterns I noticed here. Oh, you're into that? Me too, I watched that show. You know, it's a chance for connection when you have scaffolded elements, okay? So that's part of what we want to do in hospitality in our classroom. And then also, this is just really helpful. I don't know if any of you are in writing groups, but this is what my writing group does. We break up the task, and we give ourselves deadlines, and instead of agonizing for 4 weeks until it's due, we start working on it that day. Like when I give a writing prompt to students, I say, okay, like 2 things are the first things you're going to do before you finish the day today to start this project. Or we start brainstorming that day in class. Because that early resistance is a lot of what causes trouble for a bad draft in front of you. People say students are bad writers. I'm like, you know what? I think their process is weak. I think their task and their management is weak. I don't think they're weak writers or thinkers.
They're turning in their first drafts.
I'm rarely seeing their best stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? Scaffolding will save you grading time in the end because you get a way stronger product that is just like, check on the rubric, check, you did it, check. So scaffolding is self-protective for you on grading load. And it's also a way to show students that writing is tasky, it's recursive, it's all, and we have to build that into the syllabus and see it visually, like a draft 1, a draft 2, or they rarely, we, humans, will rarely do that on our own if we don't have those kind of check-in times. So go ahead.
We just wanted to highlight some of the things that you might do to build process into your syllabus. So for instance, you might have some time for in-class prep. You might have students turn in some sort of tentative paper plan where they talk about, you know, how they're going to schedule their time and also their product. I plan for my product to look like this. You might have them do some gathering and research. When I have students write a research paper, I'll often have them, you know, bring in actually 5 texts that you plan on using in this paper, and we'll discuss the value of their resources. You could have the librarian visit or have them visit the library. You could have them write some sort of annotated bibliography or a research bundle. What was that?
I said, please do an annotated
please do. Yeah, we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
I always have them scaffold their drafts. Even if I don't collect them and bring them home and write on them, I will have them bring in a draft, get in groups, and exchange it with their fellows, peers, right? And then already they've done the writing, and they're starting their writing process, and I didn't have to do a single thing. And if that's you can take them home or you don't have to. I will always have them write some sort of draft for them, right? So get out your ideas, write a draft that's a messy first draft that's more for you as the author, and then I'll have them write another draft where they're thinking more about their audience. So what does your audience need? What are their expectations? You can have peer review, you can have conferences, you can have more drafts, polished paper, and then even after they bring in their final polished paper, the one that's supposed to be completely done, sometimes I'll have them get it out in class, and they hate this, they really hate it. But I'll be like, get out a pen, read over it, and make any changes that you would make right now. And they're like, but it's done. I'm like, is it really? It's probably not.
Yeah.
And then they see, like, oh, I could have made all of these changes at home, right?
Yeah.
So it's a painful but important lesson. And you can even give them feedback and give them even more opportunities to revise. The top of my syllabus, it says, writing is never finished, it's only due. And I think that's really true.
Yeah, that's what I also say is I say, rarely is there actually a finished piece of work, you just run out of time.
Yeah.
It has to be turned in. It
has to be abandoned.
Your polished paper, so if it's due that day, you have them take out their pen and then they turn it in.
And they turn it in.
And you'll accept those.
Yeah, and I'll say, oh, good, you fixed it before you turned it in. Yep. Yeah.
And I often have students, again, because I think it's often they run out of time or energy or they're working part-time or full-time jobs, on the final draft, I have them turn it over and write on the back 2 more things they would do if they had 2 more days.
Yeah.
Because then I don't spend all this time going, oh, you could have done this. I know that they know that, which is the point. Okay? And so I often do that because then I hear from them. And I know that they know how to do this. They just didn't get to it.
Yeah.
Okay? It becomes a timeline issue.
I was going to say, with peer groups, I was resistant to doing this because
I'm a control freak. If you let the peer group talk when you're not in the room, it feels like there's a waste.
Oh, yeah.
of it.
I go get a
Even if
coffee.
they're all unskilled writers. Just the act of having someone else read their work and go, hey, I liked it, that may be helpful. Your students a lot. So I used to moderate every peer group. Now I just send them out of the room.
Yeah.
I don't even talk to them for 3 minutes. And then I go circulate and let them talk to me. And it actually has produced better thinking.
And I asked them not to give,
Feel like you're
sorry.
slacking.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. And I asked them not to give critique. I say, especially maybe in an FYS setting, because I say, you're a real reader, but give 2 things you liked about it and 1 question. Or was there anything that you wish you would have heard more from? And students are nervous to give feedback, but they don't have to be a proofreader or an editor getting this ready for publication. They just need to be a real reader who's interested. What was most interesting to you? What do you want to know more about? What do you wish they had more sourcing on? And that can be a peer group, very unstructured. If you like more structure, I also posted a revision plan that I made for the Communication Studies department when I was working in writing in that department. And I just take a section. Like if we're midway through, I'll take the structure and evidence and say, just cover these 5 questions and look at their papers, look at your peers' paper. That is a tremendous tool for it does the thinking for you as a responder. So please look at that revision plan document too, and feel free to use it. It's yours to use.
There's also the 10 writing priorities. It's a Writing Center handout. It's the lime green one that went around the room. It just has questions, and it's hierarchical. So thesis is the most important. Your spelling and punctuation and your presentation is the least important. And then it asks you questions. So, do you have a thesis, right? First question. But it goes down, and they can use that as a way of kind of triaging and making changes to their document.
Triaging, yes.
Triage. Sometimes.
So I didn't go over everything in this, but this is more of an activity focus. So say you want to scaffold an FYS. Here's some specific activities you could do.
Yeah.
Okay, it's very student-centered. Another handout we'll look at is scaffolding grading for you, okay, and how we do that. So it's more professor-focused. But specific, and it's always recursive. They can go back anytime to anything.
Keep highlighting that.
Give yourself what you need.
Oh, one more thing
Yeah.
on peer group editing, if the perspective taking week, that's
Oh, yeah.
often a good time for them to do that because I've had students come back to me and say, I had no idea what it would be like to read that many papers. It was really hard.
Oh, yeah.
To get professor perspective.
And they're reading 3. Yeah.
They're reading 3.
Yeah.
And then they realize, well, I really should put more time into this if you're reading 20 and I struggled to read 3.
Yeah.
Nice.
Absolutely.
So specific to from the powers that be on FYS, the research paper is 40% of their grade. This is part of the life of the mind. I'm going to say this in my next session, but let me say it now. What I've said from the beginning on FYS and getting approved and GE, how I've conceived of it, is it's planting seeds. Don't feel like you have to make them a super searcher for all their sources and information. They don't have to be an amazing college writer by the time they leave your course, like we need to exhale. But they do need to have the seeds planted to feel confident and to know the pathways. I love that word that we kept hearing yesterday, towards success. And their multiple drafts will move across the rubric that you have here. I don't expect a first draft and even a lot of final drafts to be highly developed. Okay? But the way you get there, you guys, the reason why it's ethical assessment for students to have these kind of expectations is because they get the support. They get the support through scaffolding. They get the support through your feedback. They get the support through conferences, through peer, building this stuff into your schedule. 40% of their grade, the research paper is a big common assignment. You know what else? It meets outcomes, but it also meets probably a lot of the reason why you signed up for the course. Your topic is all over this research paper. When we ask you to assign just one reading, they're going to be reading at least 10 or so articles. I'm going to let you set the parameters on that, and if you want consulting, me, Rebecca, or Katie. But we really want you to do, how many sources you want and things like that. I loosely think of it as 2 sources per page for an undergrad paper when you're asking, how many pages and how much sourcing. But they're going to be reading on a topic that relates to the course, and they're reading all the articles rarely can an undergrad read a book for a paper, but maybe they're reading a chapter from an anthology or something like that. Maybe they do read another book, okay? So they're going to be reading on your topic for the research paper. When I teach senior SEM, I assign one small ethics book, and then I make sure they have read their sources. That's a big part of their grade. They do an annotated bib. We meet about their sources. We meet early in that. That's where the learning happens. So please think of additional reading in your course. And maybe for undergrads, you say, if you're writing on this topic, here are 3 articles that could be good for you. Find 5 more. Do you guys ever do that kind of bridge work for early writers or researchers? This is an article that probably a lot of you could use if you write on any topic related to this course. Go ahead and give them a few sources to use in their paper, okay?
And then what we've done here is we've broken up the 20% that's writing task component options. So you can break that up the way that you want. The 20% will be the final draft, but then you have 20% to play with in terms of scaffolding. So I might do 5% to some sort of proposal, 5% to a research bundle, 5% for each of my drafts.
Yeah, but please do give credit for drafts. If you don't do the other ones, that's okay. If you make this worth 10 and 10, fine. I prefer that you scaffold a little bit more. I think I revolutionized my student writers when I required annotated bibs on every research project. In upper division, I don't even have them write the paper sometimes. They just do the annotated bibliography because that's the learning in like gender communication that's a content course. I have them stop there. And I grade annotated bibs and that's it because that's where the learning is. You know, because I want them to learn that field, not necessarily craft their own argument into it because it's such a new field at a 400 level course. So all that to say, you have some flexibility here, but please do scaffold, make it visible in your course schedule. When Katie meets with you for support about your schedule or your syllabus or reviews them, she'll be looking at that to make sure that you've scaffolded a little bit, okay? So we covered 5 essentials for this writing course, a lot, because you have a lot to read and process at home. There's a lot on the, not a lot, but enough on the iTunes U for you. And so I just want you to take a moment to turn to a partner and in a gut instinct, what stood out to you out of those 5 essentials? Okay, what stood out to you as most important or new learning for you? I hope there's something. It's a loaded question. I'm assuming you had new learning. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I haven't talked about feedback yet.
I think this is kind of a feedback moment.
So we need to not mention. We need to mention
10, but we're taking 5 more minutes.
I'm going to ask them not to mark. I'm going to ask them not to. I'm going to tell them about patterns instead of marking grammar, which is in the handout.
Yeah, and that's where I'm going next. Actually, is offering feedback really quick.
Okay.
So I'll comment on that, and you comment on it.
Sorry.
Well, why don't I do this one and you do prompts? But if you have something compelling, please jump in on me.
I just want to really make sure we talk about not.
You're more forceful about it than I am.
Pretty forceful.
Yeah, I like it. Partly because I have a proofreading journalism
You do prompts
background.
and I'll do that.
I don't know this well enough.
Okay.
Yeah. That's you.
So do you guys have more handouts?
Oh, yes.
And then,
Do you need a set? Sorry, we missed you.
yeah, and then did you just say that, I mean, I'm looking around and there are like probably 5 or 6 who've never assigned a research.
Let me say we have support.
Yeah, say that.
Yeah.
And then, what was the other thing? Oh yeah, and just that this is the only real assignment that we can do the critical thinking part. So that's
Thank you.
But no, you guys are awesome.
Okay, good.
You guys, they packed AP library books when they just packed my office. So I have to go back and I'm so glad.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you because I'm already stealing a few moments from the break. But this is a new edition. Late last night, Rebecca and I put it in about managing the grading load. Because of that scaffolding, it's not as streamlined for us. You know, it's not like, hey, I'll take your papers and grade them in a few weeks. So we wanted to give you some tips for this. More to come. I'm going to be consulting for the summer with the Writing Center, and I realize this is a priority. Most universities, when I go to their links for support for teaching writing, they have something about managing the paper load for any paper. Okay, so there's more support to come. It's a universal problem at universities.
And I just want to highlight, and this is a great handout that we just started last night, but the idea that you want to really be clear on what you're looking for in each of these different steps. So on draft 1, you're not going to comment on their commas or their spelling or their mechanical errors at all, because that's not the goal of draft 1, right? We want them to be thinking critically and coming, and we want them to be taking risks and stretching their mind. And if you give their paper back to them and they've taken this risk and you're just like, well, where are all your commas? That's just deflating, right? Instead, you want to focus on their global ideas and encouraging them and giving them that feedback. And honestly, I would argue that you don't need to be marking grammar or commas at all in this class. I don't think it's the goal of the class. I don't think it's an objective, right? Yay!
High five.
Instead, if you want, right?
If they're texting you, please address that. That's a rhetorical situation. If they're sending you, I heart you in your paper.
So some of you are saying, but I have to because, oh my goodness, this is terrible, and I understand. So what I would say is instead of going through and copy editing their draft for them, because that just makes you a better proofreader, right? It doesn't actually help them with their learning. I would say, go ahead and say, okay, I've noticed this pattern. You tend to be missing commas after your introductory elements. Here's a handout from the Writing Center. Go to the Writing Center and talk to them about this. Focus on this. Figure out how to do this better. But let's not go through their papers and edit them for them.
Yeah.
That is my goal.
And so what we did here is I kind of guessed what learning I would want to focus on. So if I got a draft 1 back from people, I'd be looking at their critical thinking. Katie asked me to remind you that this paper is really a container for training them in critical thinking, where we have to engage on those ideas. I can spend 8 minutes on a paper, maybe 5 minutes, depending on your energy, grading that. But if I try to grade everything that a paper tries to do, I'm going to spend an hour on each paper. Okay, but if I'm just looking at, please look at one thing in a draft, because that's going to make them stronger writers. That's going to move them forward in their development.
Stephanie has something
and you're
to
going to
say.
get through.
I have a question.
Yes.
Some faculty have found it very useful to record their feedback.
Yeah.
Would that be a recommendation?
I put that as a suggestion for a way to do it. So methods for feedback is in the far right to save you time and energy and to make what you have more efficient. The truth is, tons of studies in our field show that students don't read comments once it's already graded. Okay, Turnitin has taught some of us that because they don't click on all the comments and they just look at their grade. So anything you comment on before grades is what they're actually going to learn from. Okay, so please remember that. I just use a rubric at the end, and I might write one extra comment of like, I thought that example was so cool. You know, it was really personal, humanized kind of response. Just use the rubric in the final draft. Before that is where you give a lot of feedback. I'm guessing that draft 2 is where you might take it home and do more substantive feedback because it's really developed. It shouldn't be half-baked at that point. But draft 1, I don't even take them home. They come in, we do something peer, and they go, thank you, I get to take it home and work on it. And it's rapport building. I'm like, I'll do you a favor, take them home. Okay? So I give you all these activities. Instead of having to write proposals, maybe they get 30 seconds in class to do an elevator pitch on their idea. It has to be really focused and succinct. You get another oral presentation moment in. Yeah. So there's lots of activities for how to reduce your grading load, and more to come. We'll highlight those for you when they come out. But
Alex,
these values are up here and then here at the end too. Something else, Alex?
So here you just mentioned something about rubrics. Can you give me a quick sort of tie-in between the scaffolding and the rubric so that I'm not working on a scaffolding and then the students are on this path and the rubric is totally different from what I was making.
Yeah, I don't know if this will be totally different. I want to make a comment about this that I didn't make yet. This is the rubric. This is a draft. We want to get a little more feedback from some of you. We're trying to make the language a little more 18-year-old friendly because it's a little AAC and U right now. And we want to make sure strong writers can succeed with the way we've done the numbers. But really these, it's about curiosity and things like that. So in draft 1, I'm dealing with curiosity. Or in their pitch, I say, do you really care about this topic? I feel like you chose it because you know I like it. Do you want to write about this? And that's getting at their curiosity, because if they're faking it, it's going to be hard for them to get a great, strong score in that section. So I don't want them to write about topics to please me. I want them to have sincere, authentic inquiry. So I'm thinking that they should align, but this will be great feedback if you go through and you feel like this semester they don't. If I feel like I have that kind of clash in a course I design, I default to the student on their grade. You know what I'm saying? Okay. We may need to talk more too, Alex, after because of time. I'm seeing that that's not a satisfying answer. Okay.
So this is the old-fashioned traditionalist, a semicolon, you dolt kind of person speaking.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think he said something about the SS. Go ahead.
So 10% is for style and grammar and the commas that we keep talking about.
Yeah.
So we can get their polished thing, and it may be really, it doesn't happen often, but it could be really nicely thought out, logical, great ideas, good audience, and it's horrible in terms of style. They could get a 90, 91, 92 on that paper. They could get an A on their research paper. I guess I'm still struggling with that because are we lying to them? Great job, A minus.
I want to support you in this. I get you. And some of it is the traditional stuff. I mean, you're right in admitting that. And when we go over the frameworks for information literacy, where we talk about how ideas are constructed, it gets very political very quickly. We do a great debate in my course about should we teach grammar or not, and who's deciding what's grammatically correct. Okay, so I like that you're wrestling with that in some ways. But I will say, too, I don't think that if it's really terrible, like you're saying, it's going to hit on focus and clarity. It's going to hit on purpose.
It's very rare that you
I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's almost an impossibility. So if you're feeling it, you can hit that. And if you've talked to them about that especially and said between drafts, like, let's work on this, you're even more so justified ethically in your assessment to say it's not out of nowhere. They're not surprised. Yeah. But I don't think that's going to happen too much.
Audience expectations is important. So if an audience is expecting a grammatical and clear and error-free document, that's going to be really important. Yeah. it's just not the objective of this particular course. And I'm not sure everyone's had training in how to mark grammar. And so if you feel really comfortable with it on a final draft and you want to use it as a way of giving them some skills for their next, like bridging them to their next writing situation, I'm fine with that. But if you don't feel comfortable with it and you want to send them to the Writing Center or you want to point out a pattern to them, I think that's a really good thing.
And one of my best tips is develop a shorthand. I still circle things. I have a proofreading background. My journalism students, I'm like, their audience expectation is pretty clean copy when it's coming in for a final draft. I just circle things that are problems.
But just don't proofread for your students.
But
my
colleague is rightfully protective of students because I would rather give them this glorious moment to say, it's only 10 points. Please give me your ideas. Because I think it takes quantifying it to do the advocacy work we need to do for injured writers, for them to be healthier when they get through this class. And then when we get to 304 level, you put more points on that. Make it worth 20 points, Brian, because you're the audience. You get to decide that.
Yep.
But to reinforce the values that the writing program is espousing and what FYS wants to do, we are going to quantify it and say no more than 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Multilingual students, go ahead.
And this is Lauren's expertise too.
Getting a paper that is a mess grammatically, you're dealing with a student from some type of background that is they're either international or multilingual or something or other, and so you want to be careful in those assessment judgments because you could be disadvantaging an already disadvantaged student. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
But again, it's so that it's the same ultimate goal, though.
Yeah.
If we are not telling them at some level that this is bad writing, even if the ideas are
bad
good.
writing.
Whoa. It's good writing. The ideas are good. It's bad proofreading.
Bad grammar.
It could be bad. It could be horrible.
And I will give you credit too.
That's different than bad writing.
Sorry,
I sound like a hippie. I'm sorry.
And Brian, I'm middle of the road because I say it can affect the communication.
Yes, definitely.
Grammar very much
true.
so can affect the communication. So one of my suggestions on those many handouts I gave you, I say note the patterns that affects your communication. But we'll talk more about that too because it's, I mean, my colleagues get red-faced at conferences about this stuff.
One other thing I'm looking right on my grammar body.
Yeah, it's true.
There's a lot of, speaking of health and wellness in the seminar, there's a lot of research to show that even highly advanced writers, their mechanics fall apart when they're struggling with ideas.
Yes.
So drafts are going to be grammatically messy. I had my dissertation advisor tell me to my face that I was stupid for not knowing how to use it's, apostrophe S or not. And I do know how to use it and I can explain it, but when I'm stressing about how to integrate 10 different sources in one paragraph, I tend to type it wrong.
It's not your priority.
I love that in drafts.
So, I think
Finished up.
it's when we're dealing with this in drafts, we do need to note to students these, especially if there
patterns,
impediments to understanding. But we also have to give our students a bit of benefit of the doubt that the bigger their ideas are struggling with, those mechanics are going to work themselves out when their brain moves on to those things.
It's true.
Work on the ideas first, and the mechanics will also work themselves out.
Okay, Marjorie and then Brian. Good.
So, question to kind of piggyback on what was already said. Like Gary, I've never taught undergrads at all.
Yeah.
And should I assume that some of the students coming may choke up at even the idea of a research paper, or should I assume most of them will have written research papers?
Some will be very intimidated by it.
Still do.
They've never done it before.
They may have done it before, but they just don't have a lot of, they don't get as much, I have a 16-year-old, they don't get as much support in high school as you think they would. She's a sophomore, so she'll be 18 next year, but she's an honors program this year. And they really don't, even in an honors program, they get some support, but they don't get a ton. And so she just did a research paper, so they are coming in with some background on it. But even the 18 is very young.
It is.
The other day.
They're 6 years out of 6th grade. Right? What? It's very young.
Yeah, it is.
It's their first time
They're just babies.
home.
But I
It's
feel
the first time that mom hasn't said it's time to go to bed, maybe. I mean, really, they're so young.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. But I will say too, the place that makes them exhale and trust you is you say, look at the ways in which I broke up the task for you in the syllabus. We're going to do this together.
Yeah,
you have so much support. We're going to jump in the water together. And at the end, you're going to be really proud of what you do. Because for me, my major writing composition theory is take yourself seriously. Like, I'm interested in what you have to say. You're entering an academic conversation. Some of you will go get PhDs. When I lived in Adams Hall, I didn't know I was going to write this something that would get published someday. You know, and so just telling them that kind of stuff and then talking about our own struggles in my writing task and going, you guys, I'm dying on this. I'm setting it aside, you know.
Yeah.
And so being human, humanizing it as much as you can. So, but thank you for that question too. And Brian was waiting for one, and we're going to have to give you our interactive activity to do for your break time, and you can check in with any of us. Katie did want me to mention while I'm thinking of it, Brian, because you've been waiting the longest, I think, to comment. But Rebecca's here all the time. She's your new executive director of writing program. I'm helping for the summer. I'm K-Slang. I love it. I teach grammar, and I'm K-Slang at APU. You can email me and ask. Katie will give you support. Some of you have not taught a research paper in a long time and or ever at the undergrad level. And we want to help you too. So we're developmental as FYS teachers. We're all newbies in teaching this course. So there's a lot of help and support and feedback for you. And I hope that the rubric is already a lot of instruction. As I read it, I feel instructed. And we're going to adapt it a little bit more for our 18-year-old reader.
Okay, so for Brian, a true, comma, love story is a completely different idea than a true love story, right? The comma. Right.
True. Communication,
yes.
Communication.
We're essentially a writing class, but they don't have to qualify into this course. So we're going to have people from all over the place, people who are in remedial, and people who have passed out of writing one.
Yeah.
So what,
they still need it.
What requirements are we going to place on these group of completely disparate writers? So how do we really have the rubrics work for everybody when they're not at the same place?
Yeah.
I wake up obsessing on that.
Yeah.
and related, so maybe you can get this later. How do we, especially this year, when most of the students are going to be taking freshman writing seminar at the same time they're taking our course, how do we make sure we're consistent with what they're getting in other places and not step on?
I don't know.
And
we're figuring that out.
Our students know we're not consistent.
Question.
They tell us all the time.
I haven't started my job yet.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't mean to be like scaffolding is the savior for all struggling teachers of writing, but it really is because, I mean, it's almost plagiarizing proof. If I get a prompt from them and they have to develop it and I hear why it was important to them. On my pitch, I always say, what's your topic? What's your purpose? Those are different. What impact do you want to have on your audience? That's rhetorical thinking. Topic, purpose, why do you care about this topic? And then what's your plan to get to the due date? How are you going to break it up and actually make it happen? Give me some dates of things you're going to have things done. That's their research proposal. And so the research in the field, most of my favorite colleagues in my cohort are developmental. We don't call it remedial, we call it developmental writers. They would give them this rubric in a heartbeat because they know they can get there by the end of the semester. And so I would say the research is behind us that they can. It takes strong students, and some won't make it. Some will fail FYS, and then we're going to have to give them other support. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, one thing I'm planning to do is the very first session, have them just like write a paragraph on why they chose APU or something like that, so I can just get a sense of how well they write, even something that basic, and then I'm going to start referring by session 2 to the writing. Because if it really looks like it's a high alert. I mean, I agree.
One of the great things about this course is that you can all tell them about that amazing resource. It's really fantastic. And send them to the Writing Center right away. Right away. Yeah. Right? It's huge.
So one other thing, let me get you after Evelyn, sorry. Yeah. One other thing that we know professors always ask us for writing support is how do I write a good prompt? Okay, we went ahead and wrote the one for you for the final paper. That's already done. Yeah. Your research paper is up to you because it's so topic laden. It's so what we want you to bring in your professor identity and your interest. Rebecca made this beautiful handout for you. Our activity would have been, because I'm into your break time, to go ahead and turn this bland prompt. No professor in this room would ever give this assignment. Turn that into something rhetorical. These are the things that make it a rhetorical prompt, so you get rhetorical product from students, okay? And then I was asking you to go ahead and brainstorm how you might scaffold your research project. What's sounding attractive to you from the resources that you're seeing?
And then to be clear, this handout was just an example of one assignment I've given in the past. It's not for this research paper, but of how you might scaffold, or set up, what's the subject, what's the style, what am I expecting, and clear expectations.
And so thanks for hanging with us on our Speedy California Speak.